I have just recently started reading this book by Mark Nepo. It's called Things That Join the Sea and the Sky. Field Notes on Living. He's such a poetic writer. This is just a very brief paragraph. It's called Take Me Down. The gift of deepening is that the heart, that ancient fish, swims closer to the center of the earth, and the rush of being so close to the fire at the center is indescribable. Such deepening can stop us in mid-speech, or cause us to drop the soap in the shower. Such deepening can rearrange everything, the way sand on the ocean floor stirs and settles around what no one sees. On days like today, it makes me grasp at the sun, warming the horse in my mind till it slips out of the barn. On days like today, I can smell music and hear flowers, and the flower of our pain braids with the music of our love, until your story is my story, until we feel the common ancestor we came from.
Today's scripture reading is from Luke chapter 5, verses 1 through 11. One day, Jesus was standing by Lake Gennesaret, and the crowd pressed in on him to hear the word of God. He saw two boats moored by the side of the lake. The fishers had disembarked and were washing their nets. Jesus stepped into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to pull out a short distance from the shore. Then, remaining seated, he continued to teach the crowds from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Pull out into deep water and lower your nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Rabbi, we've been working hard all night long and have caught nothing. But if you say so, I'll lower the nets." Upon doing so, they caught such a great number of fish that their nets were at breaking point. They signaled to their mates in the other boat to come and help them. Together they filled the two boats until they both nearly sank. After Simon saw what happened, he was filled with awe and fell down before Jesus, saying, "Leave me, Rabbi, for I am a sinner." For Simon and his shipmates were astonished at the size of the catch they had made, as were James and John, Zebedee's sons, who were Simon's brothers. Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on you'll fish among humankind." And when they brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him.
Would you pray for me? Ancient One, fill us with your grace, your love, your peace, your spirit. Help us to deepen our relationship with you and with one another. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be filled with your grace and your insight. Amen. So I think we all love sharing news. Good news, actually. Can you imagine way back in 1928 when sliced bread first came out? Harriet, have you tried the new sliced bread yet? It's all the same. It goes in my toaster so nice, and I can make these nice, neat little sandwiches. There's nothing better than sliced bread. I'm thinking that's the way the disciples were after they had Jesus out on the boat with them. Like, guys, there is nothing better than Jesus. We took him out, and he just kind of said, "Yeah, toss your net that way," and we tossed it out, and there was this huge haul of fish. More fish than I have ever seen in my entire life. It was amazing. Jesus is like the best thing since sliced bread. Oh, wait a minute, there isn't sliced bread yet. Jesus is like the best thing since beer. There were no pants yet, apparently. Jesus says now we're going to go fish for people. Isn't that cool? I have no idea what that means, but that's what we're going to do. So as I'm pondering this interesting passage of this huge haul of fish, which sounds, Irv, like the biggest fish story ever, doesn't it? I find myself struggling with the traditional way that this is preached, though. The go out and fish for people kind of concept. Because that's laden with a negative layer of forced conversion and manipulative evangelism tactics and crusades and inquisitions and the really uncomfortable conversations you have with people who come to the door who say, have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior? It's the only time I ever admit to being a pastor willingly. And even then, they want to convert me. So I struggle with the evangelism piece. And when I put that over, let's go fish for people, this whole concept of these poor fish, and I think about these poor fish in the nets who have been dragged out of their homes, taken out of the thing that sustains them, flopping around, unable to breathe, dying in misery.
Oh boy.
How is this a good metaphor for catching people? Those nets are, and evangelically, the nets have been used to as rules and doctrine that you got caught up in and entangled in the fear of going to hell until, as people were taken out of that which sustains us and shrivel up and die, caught up in these caught in these nets that the church has created. Okay, so maybe I'm a little cynical, I'm sorry, but that's, church-wise, that's kind of where I come from. And I don't believe that's who Jesus was. I don't believe that's what his message was. I don't believe it was a message of entanglement. It's sort of what that's turned into. I think his message was one of freedom from oppression, freedom to be your authentic self, freedom to go deeper in your spiritual life, freedom from the rules, and freedom into the spirit of life. His net was not a net of entanglement, it was a net of enlightenment. But if we follow this down the evangelical, go out and fish for people, it's not ever been my strong suit. If I've failed at one thing as a pastor in the last 20-some years, it's been at evangelism. And perhaps it's because I don't want anybody telling me what to believe or forcing me to believe anything or follow some set of man-made rules. Maybe it's because I've never bought into the whole threat of going to hell. Whatever the case, I have never been one to want to force people into anything, push Christianity on anyone. So I have to look at this whole story from a little bit different angle. Okay? So let's look at the scripture again. And I want you to imagine yourself being there. I want you to imagine yourself as Simon, who eventually is known as Peter, or one of the other fisher guys that are out there, probably without pants on. Sorry. They've been out all night, throwing out their nets, their weighted nets. These are not light nets. And pulling them back in, and rowing a little ways, and throwing them out, and pulling them back in, over and over and over again. Dawn has finally come. They have finally made it to shore. How are you feeling? Exhausted, tired. What else? Frustrated. Disappointed. What'd you say, Jim? Defeated. Hungry. Maybe a little worried. I mean, maybe your family was counting on fish for breakfast. Maybe the whole town was counting on you bringing in a load of fish for the morning. Maybe you're a little sore if you're throwing all those nets all night. Or you could just be in really good shape and it didn't faze you. I'm wondering if you're also feeling a little bit spiritually empty. That maybe those empty nets are echoing or making you realize something that you're lacking inside. Maybe you're wondering if this is really all there is to life. Going out every night, throwing those nets, trying to catch some fish and coming back in. Is this it? And you are tired and hungry and you want to go home and go to bed. But you've got to clean the nets and you've got to mend the nets. And all of a sudden there's a crowd of people on the shore and you see this guy Jesus that you've heard people talking about. And suddenly he's wading through the water and climbing in your boat. Are we happy about this? No. I want to go home and go to bed. Great, now I got to deal with this. So he's in your boat, and he asks you to put out a little ways. And you sigh because you know you can't say no. So you do. And he settles in to sit and teach, talk for a while. But pretty soon you're kind of enraptured by what he's saying. Because he's speaking unlike anybody else you've ever heard talk. He is not like the rabbis who pontificate and go on and on about Scripture. He's speaking from the heart in ordinary language that makes sense to you. And he's talking about hope and about God and about love and about compassion in ways that you've never heard before. And it touches you deep inside. And you're enthralled listening to him. And then he comes to the end and he looks at you and he says, Simon, let's go out into deeper water. Let's cast your nets again. Oh, you are now back to reality and thinking, no, this is where I want to go home. But you look at him, you look in his eyes, and this man has inspired you as he's been talking, and inspired some trust in you. So you go, all right, here we go. And you row out your sore muscles and growling stomach and everything else, you row out a ways into deep water. And he says, I think right about there. Cast your nets right about there. And you try not to roll your eyes. And you take your net out one more time, and you cast it out. And as it starts to sink, suddenly the water is teeming with fish. And you're shocked, and you're energized, and you're reeling this in, and you're yelling back to shore, guys, bring the boats! I got all these fish! And you're pulling it all in and pulling it all in, and suddenly you look at Jesus who's standing there with that little smile on his face. He shrugs. And you realize that this is not about the fish at all. That this has never been about the fish. And suddenly, you're a little worried. Maybe even a little scared. Because as he looks at you, it's like he can see right into the very depths of who you are, and he can see that emptiness you were just feeling a little while ago. And it's like he's saying to you, I know you're empty inside. I know you're feeling frustrated and defeated and lost. But just like I filled your nets, I can fill your emptiness. But you are scared. You were raised a good Jew, and you have a healthy fear of the divine. And you say, you kind of back off, can't even look him in the eye and go, no, Rabbi, whatever this is you think is going on here, it's not, because I'm not worthy of any of it. And he just smiles and says, don't be afraid. Just come with me. From now on, you will be casting your nets and catching people. And you're thinking, you know, I'm going to do that. Because whatever it is he has, I want. And whatever it is I feel at this moment that's filling me up, that's filling the depths of my soul, I want that. And so you're going. So I wonder if another way of looking at this passage isn't to think about what it means to go deeper. To go out into deeper water and to cast your nets. Now, I don't know about you, but I personally do not like deep water. Have you ever taken a boat out to the middle of the lake? Or a boat off out into the ocean? A ways off where, you know, you can't see the bottom? It's 50 feet, 100 feet, maybe more underneath you, and you go out swimming. You're like, I can't see the bottom. I don't know where the bottom is. It freaks me out, personally. I don't like it. But what if going out into those deep waters is a spiritual metaphor? Then what does that mean? What does that look like? This is where you help. What would it mean to go out into deep water?
To have faith.
To have faith?
Trust.
Trust?
Courage.
Courage?
Fear.
Fear. To face your fears. To be open to new ideas.
To lose sight of land.
To lose sight of land. And to know you got nothing to stand on. Take a floaty. Who is your floaty, Sharon? That's the question. What is your floaty? Jerry, what are you thinking?
Pull it together one more time.
To pull it together one more time? What do you mean?
Take all your disillusionment, all your tiredness,
To take your disillusionment, your tiredness, to take
your cynicism.
your cynicism. Yeah, I got a lot of that. Cynicism.
Just push it out there one more time.
Put it out there again. So you're out in the deep, dealing with all of this stuff. You cast your nets, and whatever you pull in, you got to deal with. Whatever you find in the spiritual depths of your being that you have cast that net and caught, it's time for you to work with. To see it, hopefully, see a new perspective. Yeah.
Confidence in yourself.
What, Robin?
Confidence in yourself.
That that's what you need or what you found?
Both.
Both. Okay. Mark Nepo, in that little tiny passage, says that the deepening of the heart is like an ancient fish. I have a lot of fish stories going on. That ancient fish that swims down closer to the center of the earth, to the fiber that's in the earth. And that the metaphor is the spiritual depth that takes you down to a place beyond distraction, beyond superficialness, out of the shallows of life, and to a place that's transformative, that changes you in such a way that you can't go back to the way you were. So Nepo tells a story about an older friend that he has. And he spends some time with this friend. And about day 3, the friend says, I haven't told many people this, but I was not happy as a young man. Said I wasn't sure that the world was going to make it through. And I was pretty cynical about everything. I wasn't sure that the people who put things together were going to outlast the people who tore things apart. He said I was just basically annoyed at life and people. People told me I was too critical, he said. Anyway, one day, at 21 years old, half interested in everything, he found himself on a harbor ship. Guy lived in Montreal. Found himself on a harbor ship full of annoying tourists in their eagerness. And suddenly, on this, heavily clouded day with the choppy waters, there's a pod of beluga whales following the boat. And everybody runs to the back of the boat to see these beluga whales. And he said all you could see were these little soft brown heads coming out of the water and then going back down. And he looked at it and he said, what a disappointment that that's all we get of this. And he turned and he went up to the bow of the ship. And he leaned over the rail and he looked over the edge, being grateful to be alone and feeling the spray on his face. He said, and then suddenly, it was as if a mountain lifted the ship up. And there was a great blue whale that was peeling back the water underneath him. And a huge, huge eye, as wide as peace and as deep as all time, was staring him in the face, looking all the way down into the depths of his heart. He said it was as if all of time passed in that moment. And everything was aglow. And as the water streamed over that giant eye, he could see the God in that gigantic eye, searching for the God in him. And as it disappeared back into the water, it took all of his doubts with it. And suddenly life was soft and true. He said, I was born in the eye of the whale. That's the deepening. That's going beyond the shallows to touch something that takes us out of the superficiality and the illusions of life, that bring us to a place where we're connected to all things, where Nepo says the flower of our pain braids with the music of our love until your story becomes my story. And we feel our common ancestor. That's what happened in that moment. The moment that he can only describe as so moving that he was born again, anew, refreshed. And we're all called to that deepening. To put out to deep waters, to cast our nets, to deal with our fear, to pull in our authentic selves, to know God in a deep, deep way, as in us and outside of us and in all things.